Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. For those who are new, we are going through Sri Aurobindo's The Synthesis of Yoga, line by line. We have reached part 1, 6th chapter. It is called The Ascent of Sacrifice 2. And there is a link in the description to this chapter. And the reason why we read line by line is to really get into the rhythm and flow of Sri Aurobindo and internalize his consciousness and let that influence and mold us, because it comes from a high state of yogic consciousness, and by reading it enters, and that's the greatest advantage beyond having good clarity in the mind. In our last episode, that was 82, we saw the reason why the various schools of yoga considered it is impossible to change the human nature, especially the will to life in nature, the desire in nature, the ambitions that we find ourselves, the prana Shakti, its craving, its desires, its ambitions, and its refusal to open to anything higher. Whereas mind, in its essence, is seeking knowledge and something that seems to be very noble, that is in essentially pure and noble. So is love. Love is seeking harmony, and that is beautiful, noble. That's the very essence of love. But when it comes to power, there is this aggressive self-affirmation, ambition, conquest, control, battle, and the desires, and along with it, with that intense passion, great deal of distortions and perversions and violence that comes with it. And therefore, in its outward appearance, it is not showing any signs of anything that is noble. And because of its refusal to open to anything higher, nor the mind can truly tame it, because of this unchangeable nature, there was this final conclusion that better to forget it. Best course is to renounce, reject all this, and ascend into a pure wideness of the spirit and its freedom. But life on earth, it is like a dog's tail, it cannot be changed. Now we will be diving into what is the remedy for this. So a remedy, yet there should be. So we are starting from paragraph number 18 of this chapter. A remedy, yet there should be, and is, a way of redress and a chance of transformation for this troubled, vital nature. There should be and there is a remedy. A way to fundamentally transform this. It is possible. But for that, the cause of deviation must be found. The cause of deviation. On one hand, everything is nothing but the divine manifesting and expressing. And yet, within that, there is a deviation and a distortion that is taking place. So what is the cause of this distortion that makes this life energies, the prana shaktis, its will to life, turn out to be what it is? For that, the cause of deviation must be found and remedied at the heart of life itself and in its very principle. So remedy cannot be brought in the mind or other instruments. It has to be found in the life principle itself. In the prana Shakti itself, there is something that can be the leverage, the remedy at the heart of life itself and in its very principle. Since life too is a power of the divine. This life energy, the vitality too is a power of the divine and not a creation of some malignant chance or dark titanic impulse, however obscure or perverted may be its actual appearance. So there is one thing is the appearance of the vital energy and its operations in us. But we must also remember this, that essentially it is a power of the divine, not a creation of a malignant chance or a dark titanic impulse. Titanic, an immensely powerful impulse. So let's read this line once again. A remedy, yet there should be, and is, a way of redress and a chance of transformation for this troubled vital nature. But for that, the cause of deviation must be found and remedied at the heart of life itself and in its very principle, since life too is a power of the divine and not a creation of some malignant chance or dark titanic impulse, however obscure or perverted may be its actual appearance. In life itself, there is the seed of its own salvation. Here comes the paradox. In life itself, here he is using the word life with a capital L. It is representing that universal life energy, the prana Shakti that is flowing through everything, the vital force that creates the life and its evolution on earth. That life itself, there is the seed of its own salvation. It is from the life energy that we must get our leverage. So there is the seed of its salvation in the life energy itself. Therefore, we must find it there and use that as our leverage. For though there is a saving light in knowledge, and a redeeming and transforming force in love. So these are the other two instruments. In knowledge, we see a saving light. In love, we see a transforming force. When we look into knowledge and love, these become very clearly obvious, but not in life vital energy. These cannot be effective here unless they secure the consent of life. So even when there is a saving light in knowledge and a transforming force in love, a redeeming and transforming force in love, they cannot be successful unless they secure the consent of life. The vital force in us must consent. Without it, neither the knowledge and its saving light, nor love and its redeeming and transforming force can be effective. This is our agency of effective action and can use the instrumentation of some delivered energy at its center for a sublimation of the erring human into a divine life force. So these cannot be effective. Both knowledge and love cannot be effective here unless they secure the consent of life and can use the instrumentation of the life force of some delivered energy at its center. So this energy has to be delivered right at the core of its movement There must be a delivered energy of this life force. For a sublimation of the erring human into a divine life force. Our human life force, if it is to become a divine life force, there is, in the very core of that movement of life itself, we must find a delivered energy, and that will be the key to transformation of this otherwise impossible vital nature. In life itself, there is the seed of its salvation. It is from the life energy that we must get our leverage. For though there is a saving light in knowledge, a redeeming and transforming force in love, these cannot be effective here unless they secure the consent of life and can use the instrumentation of some delivered energy at its core, at its center, for a sublimation of the erring human into a divine life force. It is not possible to cut the difficulty by splitting up the works of sacrifice. That's one of the temptations that we may fall into. It is not possible to cut the difficulty by splitting up the works of sacrifice, separating the works of sacrifice. We cannot escape it by deciding that we shall do only the works of love and knowledge and leave aside the works of will and power, possession and acquisition, production and fruitful expense of capacity, battle and victory and mastery. These words, these are the very life breath of this energy that we find getting expression when our vitality increases. It has this will and power, possession and acquisition, production and fruitful expense of capacity. So there is this tendency to possess, acquire, production, fruitful expense of capacity, battle and victory and mastery. All this is very native to the life energy. And we cannot say, I will only do works of knowledge and works of love, because that seems to be easy, and split this away, this whole works of will and power, our willpower and our immense capacity to do, production, fruitful expense of capacity, battle, victory and mastery, all these are very, very native to the dimension of power, the prana Shakti. Striking away from us the larger part of life, because these constitute the larger part of life, not just the works of love and works of knowledge. There is this whole battle and victory and mastery, possession, acquisition, production, fruitful expense of capacity, all that. Striking away from us the larger part of life because it seems to be made of the very stuff of desire and ego. Wherever there is ego, there is this need for this self-assertion. From there comes the conflict. On one hand, there is desire for acquisition, for possession, for control, and all the ambitions. And that is well married to the ego, I, me, and myself. My needs, my desires, my ambitions, my accomplishments, my possession, my control. I want to be in charge. I want to master. And I want to conquer. I am ready to take on any battle. And I have the intense passion. Those who have a very low vitality, they may not experience this. Though secretly they fantasize about having power, but when you have high vitality, then there is this immense impulsion towards action, towards conquest, possession, mastery. These are very native to the life energy. It seems to be made of the very stuff of desire and ego. And that's how it appears. It's so full of desire and ego. It is so centered around itself, my accomplishments. And therefore doomed to be a field of disharmony and mere conflict and disorder. Because it is of this, in its outward appearance, very stuff of it is desire and ego, therefore doomed to be a field of disharmony and mere conflict and disorder. Yes. So we see it everywhere in the world. This endless conflict and disharmony, disorder, because of the egos that are triggered, ambitious egos, and the power games, the power politics, whether it is in the family or in the workplace or in the larger society, in the politics, it is so crudely visible. This entire game of desire and ego and its ambitions, self-centered action, egos asserting against each other, and the continuous battle not just between individuals but between communities, between nations, for the possession of territories, for the possession of resources, material resources. The battle is on. I want to conquer the minerals of Africa, and I want to control African economy, or I want to control the Chinese economy, Indian economy, and various nations are competing, and I want your territory. Battles are drawn everywhere. And the same thing within individual human life, between neighbors, all these conflicts in a small scale repeats. Between individuals, this is my territory, this is your territory. Don't step into my territory. Workplace, constant tendency where we rub against each other's egos and boundaries, and resultant conflicts. So it is not possible to cut off the difficulty by splitting up the works of sacrifice. We cannot escape it by deciding that we shall do only the works of love and knowledge and leave aside the works of will and power, possession and acquisition, production and fruitful expense of capacity, battle and victory and mastery, striking away from us the larger part of life because it seems to be made of the very stuff of desire and ego, and therefore doomed to be a field of disharmony and mere conflict and disorder. And this is what our popular media reports. The continuous drama of life, conflicts, victories, who won, and everything is made into a competition to win. Even children are taught to compete already in the school to become the first rank. And that continues throughout life, to become the richest man, richest woman, the most powerful individual, to control the territories. All that. This is the very stuff of our major part of life. And this cannot be split away and put aside, saying that I will only do the works of love and works of knowledge. That won't work, because this constitutes a major portion of our life. For the division cannot really be made, or if attempted, it must fail in its essential purpose. Why should it fail? Since it would isolate us from the total energies of the world power. If the will to life is separated and we use only the movement of love and knowledge, it will isolate us from the total energies of the world power. Capital W, capital P, connected with a hyphen. The power that is behind the world, manifesting and moving everything. It's a universal power. And that power is expressing as love, as knowledge, as will to life, that intensity. If the will to life is cut off, then the totality of that world power will not be accessible to us. It will be a very narrow range of force that is available. The total energy, since it would isolate us from the total energies of the world power and sterilize an important part of integral nature. Integral nature, the totality of nature. Nature has these three movements: love, knowledge, power. Integral nature, all three must be there. Just the one force in it that is a necessary instrument for any world creative purpose. This will to life, vitality, the vital force, this is the key to world creative purpose. This is the instrument for creation in the physical material world. Necessary instrument for any world creative purpose. If you have a vision, a dream, a purpose to manifest something, to create something, you need immense vitality. If you don't have vitality, you may have beautiful ideas but no capacity for manifestation. You may love your idea, you may love all the people, but without power, you cannot mobilize people, resources, money, and manifest your dream. It is impossible. Therefore, this will to life of the vital force in us, it's absolutely critical, an instrument for the fullness of life, for the integral nature, total energies of world power. For the division cannot really be made, or if attempted, it must fail in its essential purpose, since it would isolate us from the total energies of the world power and sterilize an important part of integral nature. Just the one force in it that is necessary instrument in any world creative purpose. The life force is an indispensable intermediary. It is indispensable. The effectuating element in nature here, this is what enables effective action. If our action is to be successful in this world, in the material flow of nature, this is absolutely indispensable, the vital force. Mind needs its alliance if the works of mind are not to remain shining inner formations without a body. If an idea is to be embodied here in matter, mind would require the alliance with the life force. An idea has to move into action. That requires the immense vitality to dynamize the idea, make it move towards manifestation. Otherwise, ideas will remain without a body, disembodied ideas, not embodied ideas. The spirit needs it to give an outer force and form to its manifested possibilities and arrive at a complete self-expression incarnated in matter. The spirit needs this vital force to arrive at a complete self-expression. Spirit wants to express itself, and that requires this vital force so that the spirit can become incarnated in matter, in this material life. So, spirit can reveal itself as an idea in the mind, but from the mind, if it is to move towards materialization, then the vital force as an instrument has to let that idea animate the life force so that it can manifest, so that ultimately the spirit finds its expression through the mind, through the life energy, and finally into material physical expression. So the life force is an indispensable intermediary, the effectuating element in nature here. Mind needs its alliance if the works of mind are not to remain shining inner formations without a body. It could be an inspired, beautiful idea you are holding, but it will remain bodiless. The spirit needs it to give an outer force and form to its manifested possibilities and arrive at a complete self-expression incarnated in matter. We are souls incarnated. The spirit's incarnation is an individualized soul here in matter. So through us, if a manifestation has to happen, a work has to happen, we need to have the totality of the instrumentation, not just the mind, not just the heart, but this immense power of effective action. If life refuses the aid of its intermediary energy to the spirit's other workings, or is itself refused, they are likely to be reduced for all the effect they can have here to a static seclusion or a golden impotence. I'm using usage, golden impotence. Static seclusion. And this happens if life refuses the aid of its intermediary energy, our vital energy, to the spirit's other workings, or is itself refused. They are likely to be reduced for all the effect they can have here to a static seclusion or a golden impotence. Or if anything is done, it will be a partial irradiation of our action, more subjective than objective, modifying existence perhaps, but without force to change it. We can modify a little bit here and there. Partial irradiation, but predominantly a subjective movement, not much objective expression. While we can modify a little bit of life, it cannot fundamentally change it without this intermediary instrumentation of strong vitality, the dimension of power, the will to life. If life refuses the aid of its intermediary energy to the spirit's other workings, or is itself refused, they are likely to be reduced for all the effect they can have here to a static seclusion or a golden impotence. This static seclusion, that is in our inner chambers where we can discover profound knowledge, wisdom, ideas, but they remain in that inner world without a capacity for manifestation. It remains static, not dynamic, and a golden impotence. Golden because what you have discovered is something very beautiful, but it is not effective. Golden impotence, or if anything is done, it will be partial irradiation of our action, more subjective than objective, modifying existence perhaps, but without force to change it. Yet if life brings its forces to the spirit, but unregenerate. Now, even if life collaborates, the vital force collaborates, but if it is an unregenerate vital force, a worse result may follow, since it is likely to reduce the spiritual action of love and knowledge to diminished and corrupted motions, or make them accomplices of its own inferior or perverse workings. So spirit expressing itself as love and knowledge and gets the support of life force, the vital force, the vitality. But if this vitality is corrupted, you may have beautiful ideals, the dream, all love and affection and beautiful joy, clear ideas, all that you wanted to do. But if the life energy that supports it, if this is tainted with desire and ambition, it will degenerate the quality of your love, quality of your knowledge, and it will drag down everything into its corrupted motions and make them accomplices of its own inferior and perverse workings. So the life force and the vitality and its immense ambitions and desire and compulsions will quietly demand the love and knowledge to serve it. Without you realizing, you get colored by these distortions of this ambitious vital force when it awakens, when it supports. This is one of the great danger that can happen if the vital is not purified. So it's not enough to get support and consent. It has to be a pure vital, a purified vital, otherwise it will distort and damage. Yet if life brings its forces to the spirit but unregenerate, a worse result may follow, since it is likely to reduce the spiritual action of love and knowledge to diminished and corrupted motions, or make them accomplices of its own inferior or perverse workings. And this is some of the common pitfalls in yoga, because most people start with either love or knowledge, and these are noble in their aspiration. And your sadhana is proceeding in refining and purifying the mind, and meditation and deepening of the journey, and love getting refined into increasingly sublime devotion and adoration for the divine. And at one point, the larger vital force enters. And if that is not purified, that's when both this love and knowledge gets colored, and you start fantasizing about your intense passion for action as a divine will that is propelling you. And since the mind is not necessarily the best instrument that can discern these colorings, it will become an instrument, a slave of those rising ego and ambition that gets amplified with the influx of a great vitality. Whatever may be done by other world shunning or heaven seeking disciplines, whatever may be done by other world shunning or heaven seeking disciplines, world shunning, that is, this world is a maya, this is an illusion, this is nothing but suffering. That's the world shunning. And heaven seeking disciplines. Heaven seeking. This world is not the place. We should reject this and ascend into a heaven of the spirit, whether you conceive it as a formless or whatever be the conception of nirvana or inner dissolution. There is a heaven seeking disciplines. This is the difficult but unavoidable task of the integral yoga. Difficult but unavoidable. For those who are seeking integral yoga, this is unavoidable. We must take on this life force. It cannot afford to leave unsolved the problem of the outward works of life. Outward works of life, that is where we come across the battle of life, the Kurukshetra. You may not be interested in war, but the war is interested in you. Conflict will come your way, especially if you have acquired some wealth, then there are people who are interested in your wealth. So all that comes your way, the battles are bound to come. It cannot afford to leave unsolved the problem of the outward works of life. It must find in them their native divinity. There is a native divinity in the life force. It has to be found. And ally it firmly and forever to the divinities of love and knowledge. So among these three instruments, there is the divinity of love, there is the divinity of knowledge. Similarly, right at the heart of the dimension of power, there is the divinity of power. That has to be recovered. Then this can truly support knowledge and love. If it is not recovered from its outer perverted, distorted formations, if we don't discover it, if we don't liberate it, we will be colored and distorted by the nature of desire and ego of the vital force. So whatever may be done by other world-shunning or heaven-seeking disciplines, this is the difficult but unavoidable task of the integral yoga. It cannot afford to leave unsolved the problem of the outward works of life. It must find in them their native divinity and ally it firmly and forever to the divinities of love and knowledge. So in our outward works of life, we need to find that divinity behind the appearances. Then the alignment and support to love and knowledge will happen, so that the knowledge and love can flow towards proper manifestation and embodiment in the world. It is no solution either to postpone dealing with the works of life till love and knowledge have been evolved to a point at which they can be sovereignly and with safety lay hold on the life force to regenerate it. So this is another idea, that is, you refine the knowledge and love, let them evolve to such a point they become capable of sovereignly and safely lay hold of life force to regenerate it. Can mind and love regenerate this immense vital force? That is the question here. We are assuming that either to postpone dealing with the works of life till love and knowledge have been evolved to a point at which they can sovereignly and with safety lay hold on the life force to regenerate it. For we have seen that they have to rise to immense heights before they can be secure. Both love and knowledge, in our previous episodes, in this chapter called the Ascent of Sacrifice, we have seen that how the knowledge has to ascend all the way to supramental level, how love has to ascend all the way to supramental levels. Then only they become sovereign. That means effective in the material nature. If they don't reach that height, they cannot be effectively sovereign. Till love and knowledge have been evolved to a point at which they can sovereignly and with safety lay hold on the life force to regenerate it. For we have seen that they have to rise to immense heights before they can be secure from the vital perversion which hampers the hamstrings their power to deliver. So there is love and knowledge that has to make an immense ascension into the greater heights. Otherwise, an ascension from the vital perversions of the lower nature. Then only they can have the power to actually deliver this fallen force, this vital force, to its native divinity. If once our consciousness could reach the heights of a supramental nature, then indeed these disabilities would disappear. That's a point that he would repeat again and again and again from various angles. If once our consciousness could reach the heights of supramental nature, then indeed these disabilities would disappear. The disability to handle the life force without getting distorted and perverted by it. That is possible only when the supramental force comes down. And that can sovereignly deal with. Otherwise, there is always either a distortion or down the line gradual fossilization, disintegration. But there is the dilemma. What is the dilemma? That it is impossible to reach the supramental heights with the burden of an unregenerated life force on our shoulders. So we have a double bind here. Unless love and knowledge ascend to supramental level, they cannot be powerful enough to transform this vital force. But as long as this vital force remains untransformed, unregenerated, love and knowledge cannot fully ascend. So we are kind of a stuck situation here. Without ascending, we cannot transform. Without transforming, we cannot ascend. Serious trap here. And equally impossible to regenerate radically the will in life without bringing down the infallible light and unconquerable power that belong to the spiritual and supramental levels. In order to transform this, we have to bring down the supramental consciousness. But to bring it down, we have to first ascend. But to ascend, we need to transform. But to transform, we need to bring it down. So we go in circle. Here we have a challenge. Here there is the dilemma that it is impossible to reach the supramental heights with the burden of an unregenerated life force on our shoulders, and equally impossible to regenerate radically the will in life without bringing down the infallible light. Infallible. Supramental light is infallible, an unconquerable power. The supramental light and power, that alone, and that belong to the spiritual and supramental level, that alone can successfully and sovereignly deal with this life force. The supramental consciousness is not only a knowledge, a bliss, an intimate love and oneness, it is also a will, a principle of power and force. And it cannot descend till the element of will, of power, of force, of this manifested nature is sufficiently developed and sublimated to receive and bear it. For the supramental force to manifest, and the very nature of supramental force is not only knowledge and bliss, not only intimate love and oneness, it is also a will, a principle of power and force. And that supramental power and force cannot descend till the element of will, power and force in this manifest nature, in our lower nature, is sufficiently developed and sublimated to receive it. It has to be developed and made sublime, refined, so that it is capable of receiving. It is not that the higher consciousness doesn't want to come down. There is no capacity for reception. That is the fundamental problem. Human nature is so narrow. Our molds of mind, life and body are so narrow, it cannot receive the immense power. There is a need to develop it, make it sublime, make it receptive so that they can gradually open to the descending force of higher spiritual planes and all the way to the supramental force. So the receptivity within our instrumental nature, particularly the will to life, the vital force, its will, power and force, that has to be made more refined and sublime and receptive. Then this will be possible. But will, power, force are the native substance of the life energy. A native substance of the life energy. The vitality in us, the prana Shakti, the vital force, its very substance is this will, power, force. This is how we experience it in its very substance. Will, power, force are the native substance of the life energy. And herein lies the justification for the refusal of life to acknowledge the supremacy of knowledge and love alone. So here comes grand old battle lines where various spiritual traditions across millennia have been proclaiming that the path of love is superior, the path of knowledge is superior. Both will come together and say the path of works and this ordinary life is utterly inferior. But life refused to accept that the path of knowledge and path of love are anything superior, because within it there is a divinity, and it knows at a deeper level that its very substance itself is will, power and force, and that comes from a deeper, higher range, though in its manifest human nature it is unaware, because we live in our surface nature. In the depths, it is the very substance of will, power and force, all caps, are the native substance of the life force. And herein lies the justification for the refusal of life to acknowledge the supremacy of knowledge and love alone. It's a you have to accept me. I cannot accept you alone as the supreme. I am also coming from that source. You have to honor me, you have to accept me. For its push towards the satisfaction of something far more unreflecting, headstrong and dangerous, that can yet venture too in its own bold and ardent way towards the divine and the absolute. What appears to be this unreflecting, headstrong and dangerous pushes, this will to life, the vital force in us, has this immense drive and push towards the satisfaction of something far more unreflecting, headstrong and dangerous compared to love and knowledge. This vital force has its unreflecting, it doesn't think, it doesn't contemplate, it doesn't wait and analyze. It is headstrong, it rushes into action for the satisfaction, and it can take on any danger. It is absolutely courageous, bold, wild horse. Its push towards satisfaction of something far more unreflecting, headstrong and dangerous, that can yet venture too in its own bold and ardent way. This is very native to this force, very bold and ardent, very intense. Even for sadhana, when this become your instrument, it's an immense support that can yet venture too in its own bold and ardent way towards the divine and the absolute. This force too can ardently, intensely, passionately move towards divine and absolute. It is perfectly possible. But will, power, force are the native substance of the life energy. And herein lies the justification for the refusal of life to acknowledge the supremacy of knowledge and love alone, for its push towards satisfaction of something far more unreflecting, headstrong and dangerous, that can yet venture too in its own bold and ardent way towards the divine and absolute. And this aspect brings a tremendous intensity and rapidity to the process of yoga. when we are able to bring that force the right way. Love and wisdom are not the only aspect of the divine. There is also its aspect of power. And it is this aspect of power India rejected in one point of India's spiritual history. And when the power was rejected, the whole vitality of the nation declined. Degeneration of the nation happened. The conquest of the nation happened. And we focused on love and knowledge. They are sweet, wonderful. But with the loss of power, it became truncated. The whole wider force of the world force was limited. The integral nature was not able to express fully, only partially through love and knowledge. When the power was gone, the vitality of the nation declined. Love and wisdom are not the only aspects of the divine. There is also its aspect of power. So the divine has to be known as knowledge, as love, as power. In the Gita, we have the Vishwarupa Darshanam, where Arjuna is seeing Sri Krishna in his original divine Vishwarupa, but aspect of power, who was presiding over the entire war. There is this aspect of power of the divine. As the mind gropes for knowledge, as the heart feels out for love, so the life force, however fumblingly or trepidantly, stumbles in search of power and control given by power. Search for power we look down upon. We say this person is power hungry. Yes, we see the distortion of things, but distortion is not an excuse to entirely throw that away. The power has to be recovered, because however fumblingly and trepidantly power stumbles in search of, the life force stumbles in search of power and the control given by power. Even if you don't desire power, secretly there is a fantasy about having control over situations. In order to have control over anything, you need power. But to deal with power means dealing with all its distorted dimensions. And it's a battlefield. And no one wants to get dirty and ugly. So you prefer to the knowledge domain alone, love aspect alone, leave power alone. It is for the politicians, for the office politics, for the home politics, for the social politics, whatever. I don't want to touch it. I am into spiritual seeking, therefore I don't want to touch power, I don't want to touch money, all that. This is not for integral yoga, because as the mind gropes for knowledge, as the heart feels out for love, so the life force, there is a life force in us that, however fumblingly and trepidantly, stumbles in search of power and control given by power. This is natural, most fundamental, not to be rejected, denied, refused to acknowledge. Nothing of that nature. We need to acknowledge that it is stumbling its way towards authentic power, the divine power, and the control it brings. It is a mistake of the ethical or religious mind to condemn power. This had been the tradition, the ethical and religious mind condemning power. It's a mistake of the ethical or religious mind to condemn power, as in itself a thing not to be accepted or sought after, because naturally corrupting and evil. Power is seen as something that is naturally corrupting and evil. So is money. Having lots of money is treated as if someone has a lot of money, there must be some dark side to it. That is how this person must have acquired money. And there is a general rejection of power. Because in itself a thing to be not to be accepted or sought after, because naturally corrupting and evil. In spite of its apparent justification by a majority of instances, this is at its core a blind and irrational prejudice. This prejudice against power. There is nothing rational about it. Yes, there is justification through plenty of examples all around. We look around politicians, that is enough reason to condemn power and justify your stand that this is to be rejected totally. But that rejection is in itself fundamentally irrational. It is a mistake of the ethical or religious mind to condemn power, as it is as in itself a thing to be not to be accepted or sought after, because naturally corrupting and evil. In spite of its apparent justification by a majority instances, this is at its core a blind and irrational prejudice. Sri Aurobindo is saying it is also a blind and irrational prejudice. However corrupted and misused, as love and knowledge too are corrupted and misused, power is divine and put here for a divine use. We know love and knowledge can be misused, can be corrupted. The same thing, power too can be misused, can be corrupted, but it can be put for a divine use. Just like love and knowledge can be put for divine use, though much easy, however difficult it is, power too can be put for a divine use. Here, corrupted and misused, as love and knowledge too are corrupted and misused, power is divine and put here for a divine use. Shakti, will, power, is the driver of the worlds. And whether it be knowledge force or love force, life force, action force, body force, is always spiritual in its origin and divine in its native character. So Sri Aurobindo has given this full layering. The top layer is knowledge force. There are all types of forces. Of it, there is one is the knowledge force. Then there is a love force, force of love. There is a life force, the vitality, the drive, the dynamism, the enthusiasm, the power to mobilize. Then there is an action force, the will that is setting things in motion, in action. Then there is a body force, the physical forces. Our body is a material thing. And science is primarily dealing with the body force, physical forces of nature, harnessing physical forces of nature, whether it is gravitational force, electromagnetic force, nuclear forces, whatever it is, we are putting those forces into use and trying to guide them with mental force. But mind and its intelligence can be at the service of a degenerate form of life force or love force. This is where greed, lust, all that come and distort everything, because there are intermediate forces of love force, life force, or action force. They can distort, they are coloring. However intelligent you are, this intelligence can be easily taken for a ride by the vital force that is distorted, that has its own internal corruption. However, just like knowledge force, love force, life force, action force, and body force, they are all always spiritual in its origin, divine in its native character. So that's a fundamental thing to recognize. Shakti, will, power is the divine driver of the worlds. The world creation, the manifest world and its movement, its immense interactions, there is an omnipresent, omnipotent Shakti presiding over it. And that Shakti flows out in various layers. And in that layering comes all this as knowledge force, as love force, as life force, as action force, as body force. And these forces in its origin are spiritual. And that's a very native character, spiritual character. It is the use of it made in the ignorance by brute, man or titan that has to be cast aside. There is life in ignorance. Here ignorance is capital I. Life in ignorance that misuses. It misuses knowledge, it misuses love, it misuses the power. And that misuse is to be cast aside, wrong use. So it is the use of it made in the ignorance by the brute, man or titan that has to be cast aside and replaced by its greater, natural, even if to us supernormal action led by light of an inner consciousness which is in tune with the infinite and the eternal. So we have to replace this brute nature, the titanic nature, cast aside that, and it has to be replaced with a greater natural action led by the light of an inner consciousness. Natural action led by light of an inner consciousness. We need to discover the light of an inner consciousness that will guide, which is in tune with the infinite and eternal. This inner light is in tune with the infinite and eternal, therefore it can guide and lead this force and replace, transform it fundamentally. It is the use of it made in the ignorance by the brute, man or titan that has to be cast aside and replaced by its greater, natural, even if to us supernormal, action led by light of an inner consciousness which is in tune with the infinite and eternal. The integral yoga cannot reject the works of life. Integral yoga cannot reject the works of life and be satisfied with an inward experience only. Many schools of yoga is concerned about having the inner experience, and that alone is sufficient. But in integral yoga, it is not enough to have an inner experience. It has to find its full, undistorted divine expression in this material life. The integral yoga cannot reject the works of life and be satisfied with an inward experience only. It has to go inward in order to change the outward. It has to go inward in order to change the outward. There is no denial of the transformation of the outward. But to do so, we need to go inward. We are not going inward only for the sake of inward going and discovery and inner experience. That is the foundation upon which the outer can be transformed. It has to go inward in order to change the outward, making the life force a part and a working of a yoga energy, which is in touch with the divine and divine in its guidance. So making the life force a part and a working of a yoga energy, yoga Shakti. There is a great yoga Shakti presiding over all actions. So our life energy has to be made part of it. So making life force a part and a working of a yoga energy which is in touch with the divine and divine in its guidance. So this yoga Shakti is in touch with the divine because it comes from the divine. It is the creative power of the divine, and therefore divine in its guidance. So our human individual vital force and collective vital force, when that is aligned with this larger yoga Shakti, which is coming from the divine, and from there comes the divine guidance, then it is safe. That's how this can be fundamentally transformed. And that's its destiny. Even if outwardly in its appearances there are this crudeness, self-centeredness, selfishness, ambitions, violence, self-assertions, everything. In spite of all that, we need to gaze deeper and recover and liberate the divinity in it, so that there is a natural alignment with the divine Shakti and her direct guidance and effective action through us as instruments. That will bring us the real integral yoga transformational journey. So with that, we come to the end of this episode. If you are new, click on the bell icon, subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications. Please also share your insights, your experiences, your observations about this intense wild horse in us. Are you scared of it? Are you ready to face it? Have you thought about rejecting it, running away from it? Are you struggling with it? How comfortable are you with the dimension of power? Were you hiding in the space of knowledge and love alone? Just reflect on it, share. That will be beautiful, wonderful. Thank you. See you next week.